Okay, well, thanks for joining. We are going to explore a little bit about PebblePad today, and we're going to be talking about the platform, but we're going to be talking quite a bit about the pedagogical underpinnings and the philosophies that drive the use of the platform with our community. To be doing today. Miss Gail, can you see my screen?
I can,
Okay,
yes.
good. I am Dr. Melissa Shockwood-Peary. I'm an implementation specialist as well as a faculty member at Portland State University. I'm an implementation specialist for PebblePad, and Dr. Gail Ring is here with us, and she is our Director of Educational Partnerships. We're going to take a tandem approach today to discussing the platform. I'm going to walk you a little bit through the journey of the platform, and Gail will round us out by showing some of the benefits and gifts that the organization also receives from utilizing the platform and gathering archival assets of student learning. So, supporting students in every step of the learning journey, I like to start by talking about the philosophies that underpin the development of PebblePad from the inception at Wolverhampton University over 15 years ago to today. So the number one for me as a person who has worked as an administrator and full-time faculty in higher ed is this concept of learner equity. And as we got ready to do the presentation today, we were discussing our extended, Gail and I both have use of Eportfolios in higher ed. And because we have used multiple platforms, potentially more than a dozen across the two of us in the last 15 years, this learner equity component, which is for me a balance of power and control over the learning environment that the student manages, is potentially the most important piece for me. But what we want to be able to do is have tools that provide the ability to make connections for the learner across their learning and academic, professional, personal experiences. And we also want to be able to provide some guidance, so scaffold the processes of folio thinking and making connections, and then help them integrate their learning experiences into a unified whole, very rich type of whole fabric that they can draw on when they are preparing for the next steps in their life. And also, we want to be able to demonstrate that the platform has the opportunity for assessment as a dialogue with the learner, both formative and summative, and that is of and for the learning. So we want to be able to see the development of curricular revision. We want to be able to see the development of co-created learning outcomes, and we want to be able to see the development of our learners over time and have all of that be traceable and discussable based on the sorts of things that we gather with a platform. So after attending yesterday, today, and also Gail and I attend a great deal of conferences and support community partners, I'm going to put a little context on what my thoughts are while we're discussing the platform today. I think that providing those equitable opportunities for co-creating learning experiences and outcomes with our scholars not only rely on our mindset as we approach them, but it relies heavily on the tools that we use. Thinking about learning management systems where the faculty or the organization is largely or wholly in control of the organization and delivery of all the learning resources doesn't always allow for exceptional co-creation of learning and outcomes. And then the context number two is that thinking about our scholars' social identity, so the way in which they see themselves and the way in which other people see them, and how those relate to their lived experiences and their overarching sense of well-being on our campuses and off of our campuses are potentially two of the most important aspects that we have to really approach when we're talking about successful teaching and learning in relationship with co-creating learning with our scholars. So those components are going to support the story I'm about to tell about the learning journey. And again, we call PebblePad the learning journey platform because it is a gift to the scholar. It belongs to them. It's owned and managed by them, but it is meant to support them across their learning journey and beyond. So you can see here that we have some milestones and markers that are common for a learner to experience. We need to welcome them in orientation, support them, scaffold the learning, help them manage projects, research, community-based learning, off-campus learning, assess their skills and capabilities so we can increase their sense of self-esteem, have them self-assess, self-manage, and then support them as they transition into their career, employability, their grad programs, whatever it is the next step in their life is, and take this system with them. So we are going to talk a little bit about the points on the journey, and I'm going to offer you some examples. But first, we're going to take a look at the components, the actual components of PebblePad, the learning journey platform. There are 3 components that I'm going to talk with you about. And this is the user interface. This is Pebble Plus. This is the learning space. This is the space that I believe eradicates digital homelessness for our scholars. This is a place where they can go in and close the door and shut the windows and have complete security, privacy, and control over all of their assets of learning. Not only can they record their learning experiences here, but they can reflect and make those connections that I was mentioning. And we can offer scaffolded support in form of digital templates and workbooks and creative opportunities. We'll take a look at some of those in a few minutes. And then we can offer them comprehensive digital at scale support and allow them to be fully creative or have them participate with that scaffolded support that we provide. They can keep track with our creative suite of tools by using blogs or activity logs. We'll take a look at those. And this is where they collect, curate, make connections across their work over time, right? That learning journey. The second part of the platform I want to talk about is Atlas. And Atlas stands for Active Teaching, Learning, and Assessment Space. So this is where the learning that our scholars are doing, the evidence of that learning, the reflection on that, the context of the learning is made visible to us, right? So they have the opportunity to share for assessment and access your feedback, support, and guidance in this location in Atlas. Grades and scores can be added here and co-managed with the learning management system, which is lovely, some interoperability there. And external reviewers can be invited. So when we think about the life cycle of our students, and especially, post-COVID, the inception of COVID here, students are not on campus as much as they were, but they are still having meaningful place-based experiences, community, cooperative work, internship experiences. And the folks who are overseeing and supporting our students also need to have access to our students' archives of learning. And so this is a place where external reviewers can privately assess and provide feedback on assets of learning that could be related to external placements. So data and reports can be accessed, and Gail is going to talk to us about that closer to the end of our session today. What kind of gifts in terms of interpretation do you get when you are using Atlas to look at assets of your students' learning? And then the whole learning and assessment process can be managed effectively in a very personalized and individualized way, but also at scale for large cohorts and programs. The third part of the platform is potentially one of my favorites. So we procured PebblePad at Portland State University in Oregon. And when we did that, we knew, because of the type of demographic of our scholars, which is largely non-traditional, that we needed to have access to technological systems even when there was no wireless available. And so Pebble Pocket is an application that has a relationship with the Pebble Plus user interface for the student. And this app, even without wireless, allows for you to record your experiences, reflect on learning as it's unfolding, could be on the bus, could be anywhere, access some scaffolded guidance that's provided by faculty or staff at the school for specific reasons or generalized reflection. You can gather images and video. This is widely used on sabbaticals and, again, community-based learning experiences, study abroad, gathering lab results, those sorts of things. And anything that you do in the app, once you do have wireless, gets seamlessly transferred up to your private and secure asset store for use in any creative or prescriptive way moving forward. And this is also where external partners can offer digital signatures for things that were achieved during the day, the week, the term. You can sign right on the phone, you can sign on an iPad. So it makes it this kind of seamless Pebble Pocket experience for the user, even if they aren't fully logged in to their actual asset store. So using those 3 components, that user interface, that user-owned private space, that assessment space, and the cool queue of the Pocket, we are able to, with the platform, take the pedagogies we have in play and scaffold learning in a way that developmentally makes sense for us and our scholars in terms of approaching pedagogical practices like reflection and integrative learning, but also technical expertise. And so what we want to be able to demonstrate today is that we can support highly structured support of the student all the way to completely autonomous and creative, and that the tools in the system help support autonomy and mastery from the onset to graduation for the scholar. And so that's what we want to see, is that development of their folio thinking skills, of their ability to aggregate their learning, think about audiences, curate their work, and provide evidence of their growth and development and their skills and competencies. So how does it all happen? In the Pebble Plus asset store, the user interface that belongs to the user, every single asset of learning that is either created in the system or brought into the system has a very unique icon and categorization system. So if you are building a portfolio, if you're building a page, if you're participating with blog posts, if you're creating reflections for yourself to go back and look at later, all of those exist in the asset store with a very unique icon. So it's easy to sort and identify your learning experiences by type. In addition to that, in terms of learner equity and digital equity, you are also able to reach out as a user into other locations in the digital landscape, OneDrive, Dropbox, other PebblePad accounts, Google Documents, and pull in any other digital assets of learning. So when you upload those additional files, they also have a unique icon. All your files of learning for structure and organization have a very cool, unique tagging feature. So you can deliver resources to your student to participate with, to generate assets of learning, and include a tag. That tag may be the name of your course. It could be a critical thinking skill. It could be a grad learning outcome. It could be a course level learning outcome. In addition to the way you see that particular resource for use, the student can also tag all of their own items with their own sense-making tags for recall or for collecting and sharing at a later date. So in addition to having all of these abilities to categorize, search, sort, and attach meaning to their assets of learning, they can also do an additional layer of categorization. Was it a reflection? Was it an experience? Is it a talent? What is it that they are really wanting to say about themselves and draw on in future use? So when you have the asset store, you have all these beautiful assets of learning, you can then take those and participate with this creative suite of tools that belongs to the learner, that is completely controlled by the learner and owned for life, right? Even post-graduation. And Gail will talk about that a little bit later. They can create a portfolio, which many of us who are familiar with portfolios know a portfolio is just a wrapper for a lot of cool web pages that have things to say, right? You can create a collection. And as I just showed you, you have all these unique assets of learning, ones you've brought in, ones you generated in the system, and those can be put together in a set of intentional collections. So a good example of this is if you have untranscripted competencies. It's common for students to have a lot of experience around sustainability, per se, but they don't have it transcripted, and it's not something that they are receiving transcripted credit for. They can then create a collection that includes evidence and reflection of all of their sustainability experiences and submit those for review. They can then achieve some credit or have a way to express these additional components that they completed during their degree program. So collections are beautiful. Then activity logs allow for you to set a series of points or hours and count your way down towards a goal. This could be an external placement. It could be a goal, a personal, professional goal. It could be practicum hours, any of those sorts of things. And then our blog feature, which is pretty self-explanatory, except our blog allows for part and parcel. So if I have 27 different blog posts, I could keep 24 private and then publish the other 3 for peer review or for faculty review. So the modular approach to blogging and the collaborative approach to blogging is really unique to our particular platform. So we have these beautiful asset stores that are owned, maintained, organized, and curated by the learner. We have a beautiful creative suite of tools that they can use pretty much at any time. Now, we know, many of us, about portfolio development. Portfolio development has been around. Eportfolio development has been around since the late 90s, and we've been doing that at Portland State since around then. But aside of just showcasing capabilities and creativity with portfolios, which I'm about to show you some examples for my students, after teaching portfolio development at the showcase level at the point of graduation or completion of certificate and degree programs, I find that after a decade watching my students generate portfolios of use, that we have not done them a service by not scaffolding the folio thinking habit formation across their degree program before we face them with this super daunting, stressful task of somehow articulating everything they've learned in the last 2 to 4 years and providing evidence of it when it's locked up in LMS boxes, or they were either not encouraged to or were unable to gather all of their assets of learning and make connections across the degree program. So here are a couple examples of my students' portfolio development. And this is a litmus test for me after using a dozen platforms. Does a student use the platform to represent their own initiatives of their own free will, right? So this is a good test. Here we have scholars who are making portfolios in the system around interior design. This is a student who didn't get her promotion at Starbucks but felt she should, so built a portfolio to make the argument. We have students who are building portfolios to support assessing and dealing with stress with their peers. We have people who are managing rollerblading groups, people who are creating professional portfolios on their own that are related to the learning outcomes of their programs, people who are talking about work-life balance, craft club for women over 50 at PSU, okay. And viticulture, people talking about mental health in a more open and collegial way and the impacts of that in higher ed. And of course, just representing themselves as leaders and parts of their community. So those portfolios are amazing. But what we want to be able to do is help the students surface their learning and skills long before they're faced with the task of having to talk about their identity in a digital format and then distribute that amongst the wide world around us. So how do we surface learning and skills in the platform? What tools do we use in order to achieve that? We are going to talk a little bit about scaffolding learning with some of the resources that are built into the platform. So if you think about portfolios as a wrapper for a series of free form and fully creative web pages, we're about to start thinking about learning portfolios or learning workbooks as a series of templates that are compiled together to create a unified, supported, scaffolded experience for the student across their course or degree programs. So here's an example of what those inbuilt templates look like in the system. Here's a meeting record, an activity record, general reflection, and these are ready for use for faculty and students at any time. So a sub-selection of those, I'll just show you a quick image. In the system are prompts that include things like what, so what, now what, STAR technique, SMART action plans, journal entries, those sorts of things. So these templates are available for use, but you can also create custom templates for guiding scholars towards your particular learning outcomes. So the visual for this, again, is that you have a series of templates that you can take either inbuilt or custom and put them together. And each of those templates then support reflection, evidence gathering. They also generate reportable data. So these learning resources can be delivered into the student's private learning space, and they can participate with them and then make that learning visible to you in the Atlas space. You can see here that this is a internship workbook, and we're going to take a deeper dive into this as we move forward. But each one of these areas of the workbook then is something that the student participates with and generates that data and evidence and development of the student over time. So those workbooks offer structure and organization, allowing for the student to self-assess, self-manage, and provide evidence and make connections across the learning as it's occurring, as I mentioned, surfacing that learning as it occurs. So what we want to be able to do is help you ask the right questions for your programs, right? And how do we know if we're asking the right questions? I think that what we are able to do well in the system is help with supporting backward design. You know what your learning outcomes are. You know the types of development you hope to see in your scholars. So what is an example of asking the right question? At Portland State University, this is a first year general education, and some excerpts from a learning workbook, which is a guided, prescriptive, first year digital experience that prompts the students to think about their goals and aspirations and ask them, what do they actually learn? That guided, scaffolded part also allows for the student to, as you can see here, provide creative evidence of their experiences across the term that support the reflections that they are providing. And so when you ask the right questions and support the student to surface the learning and also allow for that balance of creative control, these digital workbooks of learning become entirely unique to the individual student and collectively inform your pedagogy and your learning outcomes. It's one of the best outcomes you can hope for. So now let's talk about the learning journey very briefly. And I want to talk about some of the components on the journey because I think it's important for you to see some of the examples of support that are being created and delivered in the system for learners across some of our community partners. So let's talk about orientation and induction, right? Orient and welcome students. How can we do that more effectively in this remote environment? We want to be able to, I'm going to take a look at the contents of this particular learning workbook here. Welcome the students, ask them to share information about themselves, provide them with guiding checklists. Do they need support for their academic orientation? What's included? How are the stakeholders across campus represented here? Which is one of my favorite questions to ask. We have the library, IT, online skills, advisement is happening here, their health and well-being. How are they being exposed in the digital environment to networking opportunities across campus? And then how do we help support their extracurricular activities and the capture of those things? So orienting and welcoming students is one of the ways that these digital workbooks are a fantastic opportunity for an organization. I think a lot too about our transfer students, in the United States, because Gail and I work globally, what we see is a high degree of flexibility in moving between organizational institutions to attain your degree, sometimes several community colleges and universities. So we really want to be able to orient and welcome students no matter when they arrive on our campus. And then once they're there, we want to support the students, right? So here we have, and I think one of the questions that we had right before we started is how are faculty sharing resources with one another? This is a PebblePad course level portfolio that belongs to a faculty. They take it with them. They utilize this in and outside of the LMS to support the student learning. And they can also share these entire course modules with one another seamlessly, privately, one-to-one, en masse to a dean or department chair. So lots of opportunities for supporting students and supporting your own development of teaching and learning. So beyond inducting our students, orient them, supporting them, as I mentioned several times now, we want to scaffold that learning. And we want to do it in a way that allows for an ongoing dialogue between the learner and the services that they need to access beyond even just faculty support. So here we have program advising. And this is in a program at Portland State University as well. And I'm using a lot of examples from there because of course I'm faculty there. But what's happening with their program of study? Are they meeting all the checkpoints? Are they tracking their meeting notes with their advisor? Are they aware of all the grants and scholarships in their area? Do they have the information they need on their field placement? And can they provide you with information on that placement, licensure, certification, employment, and so on? So in addition to scaffolding that learning with various templates that are provided, including field placement summaries and whatnot, we also need to help students manage projects and research. Now, for me, teaching undergraduate research in various programs, the triangulation between supporting a student can often be confusing. So if you have faculty mentorship going on, that's discipline specific, you have staff support around the good concepts of research, but then you also have the students' participation. So we have various pieces at play at all the time. In this way, everyone can transparently see the type of guidance being provided to the student, and the student is able to make their learning and growth around their research or their projects visible to all of the parties who are invested in the success of the student, including labs and those sorts of things. So helping them to select mentors, narrow their research, and share the type of feedback they're getting from various locations on campus to shape their work is very important. In addition to supporting, off ad hoc research and projects, we want to be able to effectively support that off-campus learning. Right. So we're going to go back again. How does off-campus learning happen if there is not a direct access to internet and those sorts of things? So having these templates or resources available, and then having the student be able to create a post or create a reflection or record an experience and add photos and images. But in this image, I'm also showing that you can push custom templates out on the Pocket. This is Pacific University. This is a PharmD program, a pharmacy program, where certain things need to happen in the field. Those templates are pushed out, the students complete them, and they receive digital signatures, and all of that goes back to their asset store to be used in their evidentiary learning workbooks. So, in addition to supporting off-campus learning, and Gail is going to talk a little bit more about this in depth in a few minutes, assessing skills and capability. So I am just thinking about how difficult it was to be able to assess skills that needed to take place in a lab, or skills that are clinical, things that need to be reviewed, visually impaired learners, early childhood education interactions, the security of the system, the ability to upload any file, video, images, those sorts of things, and be able to have them hosted in a completely secure and private location allows for the assessing of critical skills that may need to be completely private to the assessor or external assessors. So I think that's a really strong benefit of the platform itself and its capabilities in assessing skills. Careers and employability. This is where I have spent most of my time supporting students to make this leap, this transition. This is that same internship workbook that we looked at a little bit earlier. In this internship workbook, we have built what I like to think of as the whole burrito, right? So we worked with a lot of stakeholders to include every possible aspect that might need to be supported by internship, a practicum placement, those sorts of things. This sort of learning resource that is available, that is created, that we can share with our other community organizations, can be edited in any way to personalize it for your organization. You can pull out 6 pieces, 7 pieces, all the pieces, and you can use this to deliver the type of information that supports the learner through the entire transition to career, and have a relationship with multiple reviewers if needed, or a single internship oversight practicum placement supervisor. It's just a lovely way for the student to think about things they might not have thought about. How are they going about researching workplace and field locations for themselves? Are they thinking about how to develop their professional network online? Are they thinking about their narratives and their professional biographies? So all of these pieces are examples of the type of comprehensive support we can offer to students at the point of career. And then I also want to talk just briefly, because I'm heavily invested in this, the way in which ePortfolio development has ascended into terminal degrees in the last few years. So on the right-hand side, we have some beautiful student examples of career and employability portfolios. On the left side, we have my actual ePortfolio, which is a terminal degree, my doctorate, and it's a portfolio. So I was encouraged even to submit my doctoral degree requirements in an ePortfolio. So I want us to be aware that for professional development reasons as faculty, professional development ePortfolios for promotion and tenure, but also for things like terminal degrees are becoming increasingly more important in our field, especially where we are looking at curricular peer and committee reviews, annual review, and the overarching development of ourselves in the digital landscape. So having said those things, I think I'm going to stop for a moment and allow Gail to step in and talk about some of the things that I think she excels in the platform. Miss Gail.
Thanks, Melissa. While I'm transitioning, and I know Reed has to leave in like 1 minute, but Reed had quite a few good questions. One was about primarily about the administrative tools, which I'm going to talk to. Reed, do you want to kind of wrap it up with one big question before you leave, and then I'll jump in and take over.
Oh, I just keep doing what you're doing. This is really informative. And if I have questions afterwards, I'll reach out.
Great.
Thanks, Reed.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, make sure I'm on the right slide so you don't see my messy desktop. It's always an embarrassment. Okay, Melissa, can you see my screen?
I can.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, so I'm trying to get my presentation mode up and running. There we go. So Melissa alluded to this little while ago, and I think, you know, one of the most important benefits and one of the most important things that we can do for our students is supporting learner agency. And she's identified a lot of ways that we do that. Melissa and I both come from a background probably similar to many of you, where we were at the university implementing portfolio programs and this and that. And the question that I would get regularly is, why are we doing this? What is the purpose of this? And I would always say, well, this supports, you know, lifelong, life-wide learning. And but then graduation would approach, and then students, we would have to say, well, sorry, we don't have a site license to let you continue on this lifelong, life-wide journey of reflection and, you know, contemplation and showcasing work and creating evidence. But PebblePad does support that with alumni accounts. So students, as long as they're at the university, they have what Melissa showed you. They have access to creating, publishing portfolios and reflective templates and things like that. But then after graduation, they can still use all of the creative suite of tools. They can continue to create as many diverse portfolios for whatever audience, whatever purpose they wish. Long after graduation in perpetuity. So we're really proud to support that lifelong, life-wide journey. And it's free. We don't charge students for the use of PebblePad. So we support your students after they have graduated, which we're really happy to do and we're proud of. And we love to see how they use PebblePad after graduation. So PebblePad being the gift that the university gives to their student. Reed asked the question about, you know, can students download it after a course? And there's no need to, because their assets of learning, their evidence travels with them in this PebblePad space while they're at the university and afterward. But now I'd like to talk a little bit about the assessment space. One of the challenges that I had early on, and I've been using portfolios with my students for many more years than I care to admit, and there was always this tension, it seemed like, between assessing portfolios and just allowing these kind of free-form portfolios. And I always thought, well, if we've got this rich evidence from students, why wouldn't we want to, you know, look at it and do something with that data? And we see a lot of our schools using this data. So some examples of how we approach assessment is, as Melissa said, is as a dialogue. We believe very strongly, and PebblePad was designed to be a formative assessment tool. Of course, summative assessment works great, but we believe that learning over time and getting feedback, whether it's peer feedback, whether it's external feedback. Again, when I was at the university, I thought it would be so important to bring in external mentors and, you know, people in the actual careers that my students were wanting to move into, but it was impossible to give them the space to get that feedback. Well, with PebblePad, we allow for these external accounts where students can have this conversation around learners. So it's really this employing these social pedagogies that are so important. And then along with that, as we said, this idea of comprehensive reporting and analytics. And some of the reporting types include activity and submission reports and content reports, whether you saw a lot of the workbooks that Melissa previewed a minute ago. We always talk about this idea. We always approach learning design from the back end, right? You know, where do you want to end up? What are your goals, right? Back, we're employing the, you know, backward design to get where we need to be so that we're asking the right questions, whether it's qualitative or quantitative or a mixture of both. Competence and capability rating with evidence so you can get longitudinal data. That's a really important thing. Grading and feedback reports, and of course, rubric reporting. So within PebblePad, there are these lovely dashboard reports. This one is a breakdown of submissions where you see who has submitted and who hasn't, which allows some proactive feedback, right? Well, I see that you maybe are struggling or whatever. So it gives you this opportunity to be very proactive in terms of that. And the other important reports are rubric reporting. We have uploaded the AAC and U value rubrics into PebblePad. So here's an example of what that dashboard visualization looks like. So here's the full, this is the inquiry and analysis report. You can see the full visualization of grade distribution. You can see across the board what the students have done. These are fake students, so I'm not violating anybody's privacy here. You can also see the categorical view. So if we look at this overall grade distribution, we can also then drill down and see the various categories. And then beyond that, you can see where any individual part of this chart. So here, when we're looking at it, we're looking at, I'm having to move everybody's lovely pictures around. I think I'll make that smaller. So here, I want to see who is at this benchmark, who is at this category. So I can zoom into that. You see that I've had that selected, and I can get a closer look at my students within all of these categories in this rubric report. So what we try to do, and what we believe very strongly in employing, and this just came out in the last session I was in, is this idea of an educative assessment, what we always think of and refer to as assessment for learning, for programmatic improvement, for student growth and improvement, to learn from our assessment. It's an important part of what we try to do within PebblePad and within our reporting. We also consider ourselves to be very active partners with our schools, and all of our development work is created and approached based on what our customers are looking for and hope to see. We've most recently spent a lot of time, as Melissa was talking about, on capabilities and programmatic mapping, because that is an important, that's something that universities struggle with. How do we get these really comprehensive reports to show where students are across a wide range of learner outcomes and competencies? In addition to working closely with our universities to develop the system, we also really work closely with them to design and create and support their pedagogical research. We have regular webinars. We go to conferences. Melissa talked a little while ago about conference presentations that we always try to do with some of our schools. And I do want to brag just a little bit in that we were just shortlisted for an award in the best implementation, international implementation for e-assessment. So we work very closely with our customers, and we don't really think of them as customers, we think of them as learning partners. We have a very active PebblePad community, and we have a very strong support team. And this is where that award came in. We are with all of our schools every step of the way. Melissa showed you a lot of these templates and workbooks. All of those are available to you. They live within the system. You can download, you can use any of them, share them with your students, and we will also design and create them for you. So we have a learning services team that is there to, really ensure the success of your implementation and of your work. So I think we should leave a few minutes for questions. So any questions in the chat, Melissa?
I don't see any in the chat. I gave a shout out to Waterloo because it is
Yay.
their implementation, which has been lovely. Been working with them for a few years, but I didn't see any questions. But this is a good time for, the system is, it's a robust system. So this is a great time if you have any questions around things we may not have covered, or, what we did today is talk a lot about why and what, but not necessarily about the how of it. So I'm happy to answer questions about any of those three things for anyone who is here, or even for you to share potentially your challenge or the reason why you showed up here today. What's the context under which you are exploring the opportunity to think about delivering education differently to your scholars?
Well, and I'd also like to hear a little bit about how you're using portfolios and any challenges that you have.
Or even if just reflective practice or integrative learning, if anyone is
Sure.
currently doing that. Yeah. You want to take it off of the questions there, Gail, so we can see one another if we would like to.
Absolutely. I was just wondering if anybody would be interested in taking a little peek in PebblePad and see how easy it is to create a portfolio, or just take a look at the various components. How does that sound?
It'd be good. Drive around in there a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And feel free to stop me if there's anything in particular that you'd like to see. I am happy to pop over here, share my screen again. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so as we said before, this is Pebble Plus. This is the fully private learning space. So everything within PebblePad, and that was one of the questions that Reed had, was about privacy and sharing and things like that. So everything within this space, this is my PebblePad space. So if we go to my asset store, these are the things that I've created. Nobody can see what's in this asset store unless I share it, right? Or unless I open it up on a Zoom presentation, and you can see what I'm doing. You also have a dashboard. So within this dashboard, we can see, what's happening. I'm not a traditional learner, of course. So what you can see here, this is my portfolio, and you can see that I have gotten some comments on it. I've gotten some feedback. I've shared it with individual users. I've also shared it to the web, and I've shared it to assessment. So, again, I'm kind of trying to answer Reed's question because I know he's going to be coming back and looking at this, curious about the sharing and the ownership. The ownership of the assets within PebblePad. But let's create a portfolio and let's just see kind of how easy it is to get a little bit creative here. So I'm going to pop in and create a portfolio. And this is, as Melissa said, Melissa talked about this wrapper for a variety of pages or a variety of learning objects. That's essentially what we're looking at. So I've got my first page. This is I'm going to make this an introduction. So I can do that by replacing my banner image. So I'm just going to replace that maybe with one of my own images here. Got a lot of stuff. I like my hydrangeas, so I'm going to pop my hydrangeas in here, and I can resize, I can reshape. But now I'd like to add some content. I'm going to change the name of this and call this my welcome welcome page. One of the things I can do here is I can make this welcome page a global asset that I can use in multiple portfolios, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. But I'd like to add some content. So I'm going to add some content in the form of text. Hi. And I can add some various text, and you'll see that my text box stands out. I'm going to put my name here. I can add little things about me, dog lover, etc., and add some more content. I can add, I'd like to add maybe a video. So here I'm going to open up my asset store, and notice it's only retrieving videos within my asset store. So it's smart enough to know what it is I'm looking for. I believe I have my teaching philosophy, so I can pop my teaching philosophy in here. And now I've got my teaching philosophy, and I also have a little bit about me. I can drag and drop, and I can move things so that now I've got 2 columns of learner of my content. I can add an image and open my asset store and just again, pick an image. Because I'm a dog lover, I'll pop Charlie in there, my dog. But you see how easy it is just to navigate and to add content to your portfolio. I'd like to add an existing, I'd like to add an existing portfolio. So I'm going to click existing portfolio. And I talked a little bit about my portfolio that I have. So I'm going to find my portfolio. And there it is. And now what I have is I have a portfolio within a portfolio. So here's my portfolio that I use and I share to other people. And now this is just created as a nested portfolio. So you can see tutorials and webinars that I've done and research that I've done over the years and various things with just a simple, easy click of a button. Now, if I wanted to share this, I could save it. That's my cue to not forget to delete it in a second. So I would like to share this. And so you can see I have 3 options. As I showed you on my own dashboard, I can share it with people, I can make it public to the web, or I can share it for assessment. I'm going to make it public to the web. And anytime, any share that you select, you set some permissions for the share. So I can allow viewers to leave a comment. The default is to hide it from search engines. This is probably my most favorite thing as someone who had a lot over the years, has had a lot of portfolios shared with me. I would like to view it for a specified, I'd like to set basically an expiration date. So I'm going to have, and this is nice if you're sharing this with an employer and you don't want to leave it open in perpetuity, I can click on the calendar and I can say, yes, I'd like that. I'm just going to have that expire maybe on Saturday. And now I've set an expiration date and share this asset. I've made this asset public to the world. Any questions, Melissa?
Not see any questions in there, but you're doing a lovely job of showing how you can do kind of like breadth and depth and the part and parcel part, right? So for me, using an about me page that I can make an adjustment to and it adjusts in all the portfolios that I'm working in is really lovely. Or I have a curriculum vitae page. Anytime I update that, it updates in all the locations, all the different audience specific portfolios that I have. So that's very helpful too. What I really like about what you just showed is the ability to grab anything that lives in your private asset store and put it together, put it together in the scaffolded workbooks, put it together in the creative workbooks. And so I think that speaks to what I was talking about a little earlier, the balance between prescriptive and creative, that support and agency, that equity for the learner, which is largely missing from the LMSs, I think. I love the LMS. LMS has its purpose, absolutely, but it's not owned and controlled by the user. So it's nice that you're demonstrating the ways in which the user can maximize their use of the system.
Well, right. And, what we've always talked about and what we, believe very much is important and is true is that PebblePad extends the functionality of the LMS. And in some places, the LMS extends the functionality of PebblePad. So I think that's a really important thing that we work beautifully with the LMS. So the other thing too is that we have the properties panel, which again, whether you're creating a portfolio, whether you're creating a template or a workbook, what the properties panel does is it allows you to extend the functionality or your aesthetic choices within any of these things that you're creating. The other thing that I think is important to talk about is help and support. I talked about the engine of help and support that lives behind or within PebblePad, and we have multiple levels of help. So we've got the in context help. So when you're creating a portfolio, if you I forget how to move a block around on my page, you can click the help button and it shows you the top 5 or 6 things that you may want to do in the thing that you're in. So whether you're in a portfolio, that help animation is going to look differently from when you're in a blog. So this in-system help is super useful. In addition to in-system help, we've got our lovely burger menu where we have help and support. And this is our in-depth help system, which is lovely because it's, this idea of just-in-time help. Do you have a question? Do you want to search for something? So if I wanted to search for external, you have to spell it right. It is, it does like you to spell things correctly. So
that is true. Yes. The spelling, I never get past that part. Yeah.
Right. So here we see there are 49 results to do with these externals. So if I would have been a little bit more clear and said external reviewers, that would have definitely reduced my pullback. But here we can see we've got external services that you can link to, whether it's linking to, as Melissa said, Dropbox or Google, or externals with others that have these free accounts that we again bring this larger community into our space.
Miss Gail, will you let me just share the screen really quick? I want to show Abby an example. She's asking about promotion and tenure. So Abby, before you came on, we were chatting with Reed too. We have College of the Canyons, who has a faculty first approach. And they are using professional development, skill teaching certificates, annual review, promotion and tenure. But here is a colleague example. So this is Jennifer Kearns at Portland State, one of my colleagues. And this is the type of promotion and tenure requirements that they have there. So they have their home. They are required to provide a self-appraisal. So that part, scholarship and professional overviews, right? So what have they done for their own professional development? Obviously, Jennifer is very busy. What a lovely human being. The teaching, and that looks different for each discipline, but their teaching overview, the student testimonials, their service to the organization, and those sorts of things. So these are certainly, and then they have their internal letters there. This is certainly a very wide use. I'm showing these are all have been agreed to be shared, which is why I'm showing you a few of these here. Here's Deborah Smith, another one. She also has her teaching scholarship service. She includes her awards, grants, and honors, which I think is really nice. And then she includes RTP in here. Under her teaching, she includes her things. So these are used to guide the conversation around promotion and tenure and annual review. And again, in the same way, and I'll stop sharing now, in the same way that we need to support our students to surface their learning, we should be treating ourselves to that same model of folio thinking, surfacing our accomplishments as they occur, gathering evidence of our effective teaching from our students. And so promotion and tenure is an amazing application for faculty. And again, this system is a gift to you, the faculty and administrator, and the student. You all have the exact same interface. You all have the same capabilities, and you all have the same level of privacy and control. And so you can model that for your students in a completely different way than if you had a different interface or a different type of restrictions or guidance in the system. Any other questions?
Nothing's come through.
Okay, well, I think we have a few things, Abby. I think we have just a couple minutes and everybody probably needs to get along to their next session. There's a cool one happening at noon. I can't wait to get to. Tomorrow, we will be demonstrating this again, or Gail will be doing it without me, but I also am presenting some of my pedagogical concepts tomorrow that are not related to the platform. And that will be around how we use storytelling and autoethnography to enhance online learning and making connections in culturally diverse situations. So please feel free to join me at 10 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow if you'd like to. And thank you so much for joining. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out and email us or join us again tomorrow.
And I did put my email in the chat.
Oh,
if you have
good.
any questions, we are happy to continue this conversation. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us.
Yeah, thanks, Selena. Thanks, Laura. Bye, Abby. Bye, Lene. Bye, Simi.